Joining us now is Eric Mandel, director of the Middle East Political Information Network. And Eric, how much trouble, how much danger are these 300 in who are still behind, who may face Assad's forces?
I think they're in mortal danger, and that's just the white helmets, but their families also will be used as pawns. Remember, the Assad regime has not differentiated between any civilian and any armed person. Forget about that. The white helmets are not armed forces, that they've been a humanitarian organization. So I believe that if we see a slaughter of those people, I don't think anybody should be surprised.
How surprised were you that Israel was able to pull off this operation to get people from the Syrian side of the border along the Golan Heights and is literally under the cover of night be able to get them across and into Jordan?
Well, I think Israel, based upon their Good Neighbor program, which they had hidden for many years to help Syrian refugees with not only medical supplies, but hundreds and hundreds of tons of equipment and food, has been trying to help the humanitarian crisis. But it's so complex there because they're still in a state of war with the Assad regime, with the Syrian government. And so they've been quietly trying to help. They've been trying to keep out, obviously, their enemies mainly being the Iranian militias and Hezbollah and the Revolutionary Guards. So they have to play this very carefully. But humanitarian work for the Israelis, they have put their lives on the line to save Syrian civilians.
And fair to say that that has developed a certain amount of trust, because we've seen some Syrians now going to the border asking for help, others who are being medically evacuated, and now to have 400 who they may not think very much about Israel, but they knew that their lives were in danger and felt like, okay, we can trust Israel to get us to safety.
Yeah, you know, I was a couple of years ago at the Syrian refugee camp on the Jordanian border, and Israelis were collecting clothes to give to, it was the winter season, and they needed warm weather clothes, and Israelis had to take out every one of the little patches that had Hebrew letters to donate these clothes. And I started mentioning to some of the refugees right on the border, this was the Satari refugee camp, and I said, you know, I happen to be Jewish and some of these aid workers are Israeli, and they said, we don't care, thank you. And the people are people, and you know, they basically unfortunately have a despotic ruler, and they're being helped by the Russians. These people who are being bombed, the civilians, the white helmets, the Russians are not just complicit, they're actively involved in targeting these civilians, and the world is quiet about it.
And this particular province was supposed to be a de-escalation zone that the Russians had promised the United States. How much responsibility does Russia have in convincing Assad that, okay, as you're gaining territory, you have to allow some safe passage, protect people, just as they've allowed some of the rebels to leave by buses? You can't then go indiscriminately and start shooting up people that you didn't like.
Well, the rebels had a little leverage. They had weapons. The white helmets don't have weapons. And you're absolutely right. Dera and Quneitra province was supposed to be promised to the American administration that these will be de-escalation zones that everybody has forgotten about. And so what's going to happen now, the reports are there's going to be the Syrian army coming up to the separation of forces back to 1974 with literally hundreds of tanks again. And Israel is going to hope that this is going to be a quiet border again. But I don't think it will be, with a humanitarian crisis continuing, the Russians there, the Iranians there, and a weakened Assad.
Eric Mandel, director of the Middle East Political Information Network. Eric, thanks for coming in. We appreciate it. Good to see you. Just ahead.